This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. So good morning, everybody. Parshat Mishpatim. Mishpatim means judgments, laws, ordinances, and this parsha is chock full of these mitzvot from all over the place. This is one of the parshot that has the most mitzvot, and it really calls to question the whole structure of the Torah. I mean, we were in the midst of the most gripping events that you could imagine. We have the birth of Moshe, and then Moshe being put into the river and being saved by the daughter of Paro, being brought up in the palace, helping the Jewish brethren, running for his life, coming back, demanding the release, the exodus of the children of Israel, Paro refusing. We've got, did I leave out the burning bush? I apologize. We have the 10 plagues that are come. Finally, Paro lets them leave, but he comes after them. And then they're stuck by the sea, and then the sea splits, and we make it. I mean, this is gripping. This is as good as it gets. And then we go from there, we come to Mount Sinai. And we're there standing at Mount Sinai, and we hear God speak. I mean, this is so exciting. And then it's like, wah, wah, wah. By the way, let me tell you about 100 laws. If your ox gores, if you have a slave, don't curse your father, don't hit your mother, don't kidnap. Oh, did I forget to tell you that if you're a shomer, if you're guarding, so it depends. If you're getting paid, then this is your level of responsibility. If you're not getting paid, you have a lower level. If you're a borrower, you have the high. Whoa, whoa, whoa. So what is this Torah of ours? Is it a gripping storybook? Is it a law book? The Torah's got to decide. The Torah's got to decide. I went for an action novel. I don't expect to get a law book. I go to the law section of the library. I don't expect, the Born Identity. I mean, you have to decide, right? Which section should this holy book of ours, where should it sit? Is it in the law section? Is it in the science section, the first 21 verses about creation? Is it in law? Is it in science?
Yes.
Is it in drama, the book of Shemot? Is it in personal development, the book of Bereshit? Where do we? I guess you have to put one in each of these sections, right? But where does it belong? Boker Tov Ora Mashlomech, right? Where does this book belong? What is this book of ours? What is this Torah? It makes no sense. We have the drama and then just crash into the Eila Mishpatim, and these are the laws. If you acquire a Jewish slave, 6 years he will work, and on the 7th. What is this? What is this Sefer Torah of ours? What is it that it comprises all of these aspects? What would you say, my friends? Mazeh, what is it? Kathy, you're unmuted. That puts the pressure
Not
on.
on purpose.
Ah.
What's the question again?
So what book is this? What type of book is this? How do we categorize this book? What is it? Right? An author's got to know what he's writing. What type of book did God write, or did God dictate to Moshe to write for us? It's all over the place. It's laws, it's events, it's science, it's creation of the world. It's everything. What is it? What is the purpose of this book? What did the author with a capital A have in mind when he wrote this book, which is such a compilation of so many different aspects.
Well, who are we? Why are we here? How do we connect to God? How do we live? What is expected of us? I mean, it's all of it. Where do we come from? What is our purpose?
Okay. I like that. Perhaps we could summarize it as Torah Chaim. This is instructions for life. It's not just a suspense novel. It's not just a law book. This is instructions for life. And in order for us to know how to live life, we need to know, as you said, Kathy, where are we coming from? What is the backstory? And we learn so much from those stories about God's involvement in the world and God taking the defenseless, the vulnerable, the weak. I mean, so much of the Torah, both the stories and the halachot, are about those who are not in a position of power. Rabbi Sachs Zatzal points out very often how throughout Bereshit, in that world, the firstborn was the powerful one. And we have story after story where it's not the powerful one necessarily. Right? It's Yitzchak, not Yishmael. It's Yaakov, not Esav. It's Yosef. It's not the others. Right? It's Ephraim, not Menashe. One after another. And the Torah, I forget how many times exactly, it tells us about the Yatom, the Almanah, about the orphan, about the widow, about taking care of them, being careful with them, right? Because they are vulnerable. They are the weak. They are the often oppressed. Those without power are the ones we need to look out for. So the Torah throughout, it's not any one of those, it's all of those. It's life. Life is all of that. So we need to know where we're coming from. We need to know how we move forward. And as we mention very often, the mitzvot are not these random commandments. These mitzvot are there to connect us to God, to connect us to our past. And we'll see a number of examples how there are, and Aleph Beta, they do a lot of this. They show certain words by certain mitzvot or certain structures. I'll share some of them with you today. That's meant to make us think back to different stories, events that took place in the Torah, and to give us a different perspective on it. And also, these mitzvot teach us, as we'll soon see, we're going to go through a number of examples, teach us these fundamental belief, hashkafa, world outlook concepts, fundamental concepts of Jewish belief. And Oro, just 1 second, I'll give it to you, right? And Ramban explains, just in terms of the flow, he explains Mishpatim is coming right after Matan Torah, right after the giving of the Torah. And these are, he says, these are like an unzip file of the Aseret HaDibrot, of the 10 Commandments. And we'll see some examples of that also. How do these mitzvot actually come back to, and which aspect of the 10 Commandments are they unpacking and explaining to us? Yes, Ora, sorry.
The thought I'm having about your question about what kind of book the Torah is, how it's encompassing everything on a on a personal level and worldly level, on every aspect. So it takes me to the fact that God is in everything, and we have a spark of God in us. And so actually, if we follow these rules, instructions, mitzvot, whatever you call it, we are becoming more godlike.
Music to my ears. Yes, yes, exactly. Yes, I often say that if people, my elevator, my 40-second or even less pitch on what is a mitzvah, right? So, our politically correct society might say a mitzvah is a good deed. A mitzvah is not a good deed. It might be good, but that's not the definition of a mitzvah, right? Is Shabbat a good deed? Chesed is a good deed, right? Is not wearing a mixture of wool and linen in my suit. I need to send it to Los Angeles to get checked for shatnez. Is that a good deed? I don't know if is milk and meat, not eating milk and meat, is that a good deed? It's a mitzvah. A mitzvah is a commandment, but what a mitzvah is an act that a physical person does in the physical world that allows us to connect to the spiritual realm, to the eternal, to become more godly, as you said. And I've mentioned before that there's an incredible teaching that I love, that the word mitzvah, so mitzvah is that flashpoint connection between heaven and earth, between God and mankind. It's that flashpoint connection. Now, I said this before, but it's worth repeating if anyone hasn't heard it. The word mitzvah, mem, tzadi, vav, hey. The last two letters, vav, hey, that sounds familiar to us. The ineffable name of God, the yud followed by the hey, vav, hey. So you have the vav, hey is the last two letters of God's name. Well, the mem tzadi, the first two letters, also are. In what way? So there's something called atbash. Atbash, aleph, is linked to taf, the first and last letter. Bash, second letter from the beginning, second letter from the end. So atbash is like a reflection. Aleph reflects taf. Bet reflects shin, etc. So let's follow that through. Mem from the end of the alphabet, mem nun samach ayin pei tzadi kuf resh shin taf. Mem is 10 from the end, so that reflects 10 from the beginning. What's 10 from the beginning? Yud. Tzadi, let's see where that is. Tzadi kuf resh shin taf. Tzadi is 5 from the end. What does that reflect? 5 from the beginning. What's that? Hey. So a mitzvah is a reflection of the Yud K that then comes down to this world in the Vav Hey. So it's a way for us to catch that reflection of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of God. And that is that flashpoint that we have between us and God. The mitzvah is that flashpoint. So we could take it a step further based on what Ora is saying, which is a very, very beautiful point now, right? If Har Sinai was the place where we had that connection to Hashem, where we had that one-time revelation, that one time in history revelation for an entire nation. So now what's going to follow? Mishpatim, all these mitzvot, because it's those mitzvot that give us the opportunity to again have that flashpoint connection, right? To have again, not with the sound and light show of a Har Sinai, of a Mount Sinai, but to have that ability to connect. So what I'd like to do today is go through a whole bunch of these mitzvot and just see either, all right, let's see how it connects to Aseret HaDivrot, some of them how they connect to earlier events in the Torah, stories that give us another perspective in the story, what we can learn from the story, and also gives us some of the basic principles in how a Torah Jew looks at the world and understands events. So let's begin, page 416. Eila Mishpatim, and these are the ordinances that you should put before them. Okay? And there's one other point to make also, right? Remember, we discussed at the end of last week, I think I told you from Nechama Leibovich, that the structure of the Ten Commandments, that between Adam, Lamakum, between man and God, it starts off with thought, right? I am Hashem, your God, no other gods. It then moves on to speech, don't utter God's name in vain, and then it moves to action, Shabbat, and honoring parents. Because in much of the world, religion is this thought, philosophical. It remains in the brain, and actually, there are those who chastise Judaism. With all your rituals and all your minutia, and you have to do this and that. You get so bogged down in all the ritual. And Judaism says we don't get bogged down by the ritual. But physical beings in a physical world need to harness that physicality and bring it up to spirituality. The blessing we make whenever we do a mitzvah, Asher Kiddishanu, the mitzvot of, you sanctified us. It's through our actions that we become sanctified. And the Aseret HaDivrot, Professor Nechama Leibovich, of blessed memory, points out it starts with the mind, but then it's got to move on into our words and also into our actions. Ve'elah Mishpatim, and these are the Mishpatim that you should place before them. And then we go into Ki tikneh eved ivri. When you acquire a Jewish slave, how does a person become a slave? How does a Jew become a slave? One of two ways. There is mocher atzmo. A person can say, almost like communism, right? I don't want to have to deal with anything. I want to get up. I want to work. I want to finish working. And I want to know my needs are taken care of. I don't want to have to worry about this bill and that bill and balancing my budget. I'm going to work for 6 years. During those 6 years, all my needs are taken care of. No utility bills, no rent, no mortgage, no grocery bills. I go to work. I come home. I'm finished for the day. That's a mocher atzmo. And that's not the right attitude, because we're not supposed to take on, we're supposed to be avadim, servants to God, not to any other person. We're supposed to have our initiative. We're supposed to have our responsibility. That's one way that a person becomes an eved. Another way that a person becomes an eved is machruhu beit din. The beit din can sell a person to be an eved. Why would the beit din do that? What gives the beit din the right to do that? Oh, this person stole, was convicted of stealing, and doesn't have the means to pay back the person from whom he stole. So what are we going to do? There used to be a debtor's prison, lock the person up in prison. What good does that do? How does that help the person from whom they stole? No, they will be sold. The money that the buyer gives to purchase this slave goes to pay the person from whom he stole. So there's a sense of responsibility. You've got to make that person whole, even if it means you're being sold. But what does the Torah tell us? Sheish shanim ya'avod. 6 years he will work. From the time he is sold, this is not referring to the Shemitah cycle. We're not on a universal Shemitah cycle. We're on a personal cycle. Sheish shanim ya'avod. For 6 years he must work. Uva shvi'it, and on the 7th, yetzei l'chovshi chinam. Then he will go out free. And there are other halachas that apply to this. Actually, when he gets sent out, he is given what's called a ha'anaka. He's given a gift. He's given enough to get himself started, because he needs now, selling the person who was sold as an eved, right? Who was sold because he stole, right? You can't just put him out, right? We know in our present prison system how difficult it is. But when a person gets out, they can't find a job, they can't get started. So unfortunately, many of them have no choice but to go back to a life of crime. That's what they know, right? So the Torah commands us to give this ha'anaka, to give this gift, right? When a person, when they leave, in order to be able to get themselves started. But 6 years you shall work. On the 7th you go out free. What in the 10 Commandments does that seem to remind us of? Shabbat, Kathy's mouth. I don't hear you, but I think you said Shabbat, right? Right? That reminds us of Shabbat. So how does Shabbat link to slavery? How does Shabbat link to slavery? What is the Shabbat lesson that would apply to either the mocher atzmo, the person who sold himself, or to the machruhu beit din, or to the person that the beit din sold? What is the Shabbat connection? What lesson of Shabbat, perhaps, will help this Eved in terms of going forward, in terms of living a more full, wholesome, enriched life? Please, Cheryl.
Maybe it's to really reinforce the idea that Hashem created everything. And this is a day where we stop creating and stop producing and realize that we are living under Hashem's rules. This is his world. And so this is the day we celebrate by not creating and following the law of Shabbos.
Good. So bring that home now to an Eved.
Because the Eved was not following Jewish laws, but he's a slave to a human being.
Okay. So yeah, I like that. So Shabbat, in terms of, let's say, a mocher atzmo, in terms of the person who sold himself into slavery, right? So we could say that, Shabbat was supposed to be not create, right? But during the 6 days, we're supposed to be creating, meaning we're supposed to be producing, we're supposed to be accomplishing, we're supposed to be taking things on, right? Not just, well, whatever he tells me to do, I'll do. We're supposed to be seizing the initiative, right? And producing, right? So a mocher atzmo who's looking to shirk the responsibilities is, okay, I hear that, right? Now, also when it comes to Shabbat, right? So we've discussed, anybody else want to say something on that? So when it comes to Shabbat, we've mentioned We've mentioned the Lechem Mishnah, right? The 2 loaves of bread that we have at each of the Shabbat meals to remind us of the double portion of the man that fell when we were in the desert, that fell on Friday. So we always ask, so why don't we have a double? So we should have Lechem Mishnah on Friday. That's when we should have the 2 loaves of bread. That's when the double portion of man fell. But it's the lesson of the man. The lesson of the man is that Hashem provides. And by staying within the parameters of the Torah, right, not working on Saturday, a person will not lose at all. And we have the Lechem Mishnah on Shabbos to remind us that God sent double portion on Friday. And so too, God will send what you need during the 6 days of work. In America, 5 days. Sunday is the second Shabbos of Galiot, right? So here, so God, right, will send what you need. So that certainly speaks to the thief, right? You thought that you would be gaining. You thought you would be gaining by going against the will of God, going against the Torah and stealing from someone? No, you're not going to be gaining, right? So Shabbat is this overarching reminder, like Cheryl said, of purpose in life, of both the doing and the acknowledgement of God in the world. You know, it's interesting. A ganav, a thief who does it secretly, when he's caught, pays double. A gazlan, a robber, stick him up, who does it in brazenly, when he's caught, only pays back the principal, does not pay back double. Why does the Torah obligate, penalize the cat burglar, that he pays double, and the gazlan, the robber, only pays 1? So there are different approaches, but one approach is the gazlan is consistent. He might be a robber, but we could appreciate his consistency. I'm not afraid of you. You see me, right? Stick him up, give me your money, and I'm not afraid of God because I'm going brazenly against his command. It's the thief that we have more of a problem with. The thief that I don't want him to see me. God sees me, no problem at all. I don't care about God. But God forbid that that person should see me. Oh, yeah, that's going to be a problem. It's that inconsistency. I'm not afraid of God, and I'm afraid of the person. That already raises our ire, the Torah's ire. That person needs to get himself in line over there. Right? That person needs to know. Famous story in the Gemara that the students came. I think it was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. I think it was Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. I forget exactly who it was. They said to him, he was on his deathbed, Rebbe, give us a blessing, give us a bracha. And he said, if the blessing is you should fear Hashem as much as you fear people. They said, Rebbe, what do you mean? You should fear God more than you fear people. And he said, Halavai. Halavai, we should fear God as much as we fear people. Have you ever looked over your shoulder, make sure no one sees what you're doing? If you've ever looked over your shoulder, right, as he said, right, Teda, you should know, right, that you don't want people to see you doing it, right? If you ever looked over your shoulder to make sure no one was watching, that means clearly, as each and every one of us, we fear people a lot more than we fear God, right? That was the bracha that he gave. So the Ganav and the Gazlan teaches us, again, that's another example that I wasn't planning on going into today, but that teaches us this idea that our fear, we need to work on our fear of God to bring it up at least to the level of the degree that we fear people. Okay. It's also interesting to note that the very first thing that we discuss, the first topic we discuss, is the Eved. Is this person who never sold himself, or the person who was sold by the Beit Din? Right? And we know, right, as parents, right, which child are we most concerned about? The one who's struggling the most. The ones that are doing well, okay, we could sleep at night. It's the one or the ones that are struggling, that's who most of our thoughts are on. So here Hashem's talking about Mishpatim. Who's the first one that he goes to? What's the first thing he addresses? The troubled child, the child that's struggling, right? Teaching us, you acquired an Eved Ivri, make sure you let him go after the 7 years, right? Etc., etc., etc. All of those laws that apply. Okay, so here we have slavery, which gives us a nod to the Aseret HaDibrot, gives us a nod to Shabbos. Okay, let's look on page 420. Good morning, Ken. Good to see you. Let's go on, well, yeah. Let's take a look, the very top pasuk. Pasuk Yud Bet, Chaf Aleph Yud Bet. Make ish vameit mot yumat. If a person strikes a person and kills him, then that person shall be put to death. Va'asher lo tzada. But if he has not, latsud means to hunt. So the English says if he has not lain in ambush, if he has not hunted him, but God brought him to your hand, there'll be a place that you could run to. When a person acts b'mezid, intentionally, against his friend, lahargo, to kill him ba'arma, with trickery, with guile, with intent, then there's no running away. There's no place that he will be safe. Even if he runs to the altar, yikachenu lamut, you will take him to be put to death. V'chi yazid. Where else have we had the word yazid? There's only one other place in the Torah that we have Yud, Zayin, Daled. And that is in a very, very interesting juxtaposition here. Page 126. Parshat Toldot. Pasuk Chavtet. Esav is out hunting. Vayazed Yaakov Nazid. Yazed, Yaakov simmered a stew. Yazed meant he was cooking this stew. And Esav came in from the field. Interesting. Let's go back to Pasuk Yud Gimel for a minute. Va'asher lo tzada. If he was not hunted. Who's the hunter? Who is the tzayid in the Torah? Esav. Right? Esav is known as the one who is tzayid, who hunts. So in this parsha of killing, of a murder, we have these echoes of Esav and Yaakov. Why did Esav want to kill Yaakov? What would you say? Why did Esav want to kill Yaakov? Don't hear anybody. Everyone's muted. Why did Esav want to kill Yaakov?
Two reasons. He took the birthright. Well, he actually gave him the birthright, but then I guess was unhappy about that idea, and he took the blessing. That was
Yeah. So all of a sudden we see, and Yaakov therefore had to run away. Right? Interesting. So when we're hearing about a murder or an attempted murder, an intended murder, an unintended murder, we hear these echoes of Yaakov and Esav. Let's go a few psukim. Let's continue. Umakei aviv. Look at these three verses. Verses 15, 16, 17. 15. 15. Make aviv v'imo. A person strikes a parent. Mot yumat. Right? Not killing a parent, striking a parent, drawing blood from a parent, wounding a parent, death penalty. Gonev isha mecharo. A person kidnaps a person and sells. Mot yumat. Right? Be put to death. Next verse. Mekalel aviv v'imo. Person curses a parent. Mot yumat. He'll be put to death. What's strange about the order of these psukim? Number one, wounding a parent, death penalty. Number two, kidnapping and selling, death penalty. Number three, cursing a parent, death penalty. What's strange about the order of these psukim? How would you have arranged it?
The two commandments regarding the parent are separated.
Yeah. I would either have, number one, I would put the parents together, right? Don't curse parents, don't wound parents, don't curse parents, and then kidnap. Or don't kidnap, and then, right, the parents, thank you, Ateret, should be back to back. Why are we interjecting kidnapping in between hitting parents, cursing parents? So again, I saw this in Aleph Beta, very, very interesting. When we're talking about kidnapping someone and selling someone, right? What event do we think of? Joseph, right? That is our Torah's classic, horrific, devastating event of kidnapping someone and selling someone. Why did the brothers do that to Yosef? They were jealous, right? What were they jealous of? Where did it begin?
It began with their father giving him a coat and just showing such favoritism.
Okay. It began with the father showing the favoritism, right? And it only got worse with Yosef's dreams, Yosef's reports, right? But why? Right? But it really began with Yaakov showing favoritism. Why was Yaakov showing favoritism to Joseph?
Because he was the firstborn of Rachel.
Oh, because of his real love for Rachel. Rachel was his, I don't want to sound Disney-like, Rachel was his true love, right? Certainly all 14 years that he worked for Rachel. Rachel was the one who he truly loved and truly wanted to have as his wife. And here's Yosef. So the issue that the brothers had with Yosef was really an issue that the brothers had with parents, right? So isn't it interesting how the Torah interjects kidnapping which makes us think of the Yosef story with parents, not saying instead of kidnapping Yosef, they should have hit or cursed their parents. But by this very, very gentle interjection of this kidnapping between wounding parents, cursing parents, it's letting us know that when you have an issue, think deeper. Think deeper. Again, not saying that they should have hit the parents instead, but when we have an issue, don't take it at surface value. Don't look at it in a very, very simple manner, exterior manner. Don't just look at the outside. Understand more what's going on, where you are. Yes, Cheryl.
Another thing that it calls to my mind is with Yitzchak favoring Esau for the blessing in the first place, which is also like favoritism of the wrong thing. And so Joseph's brothers thought about that, and they thought that actually Joseph was evil like Esau, and they were trying
Yeah,
to protect against
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. Good. So it goes back to some parent issues even before that. Yeah. Right. So don't look at things on a superficial level. Right? In life, when things come, try to understand the source. Try to understand where it's coming from. If there is a person or a situation that's really getting under your skin, take out the time to try to figure it out. What is it? Why is it? Why am I reacting why am I somewhat overreacting? What is it that I need to resolve with this person or with myself or with someone else? That's translating into this aggression that seems to be greater than it should be. Why is this really getting to me? And sometimes it's important when you have an Ezer Kenegdo who helps you with that. Very often Nally will say to me, well, why is that really? Why are you reacting like that? And push me to to try to figure it out and to see what's really motivating, what's really animating this issue. And usually when you can get down to the bottom of it, it helps a little bit more. Let's continue. V'chiyurivuna nashim, pasuk 18. When people are fighting, v'hika ish et re'eo, and a person hits his friend, ve'even ve'egroth, right, with a stone, with his fist, v'lo yamut, the guy didn't die. V'nafal mishkav, but he was injured, he was bedridden as a result. Im yakum v'talech b'chutz al mishanto v'nikah makeh, if the person will get back up and live, v'nikah makeh, then the person who smote him will not be held liable for a capital punishment. Right? The guy lived, in all these crime books or movies, when he hears, oh, the guy lived, oh, so it won't be manslaughter, it'll just be whatever it will be. Rak shivto yitain v'rapo yirapeh. Here the Torah tells us he missed work. Work means compensation. Shivto yitain, right? His lost time. Shevet. He had to do a Shabbat when it wasn't Shabbos. He should have been working. You've got to compensate him for those lost wages. V'rapo yirapeh. And you also have to pay the medical bills. Here there's a fascinating insight from the Chafetz Chaim. The Gemara asks, how do we know that a doctor is allowed to heal? What type of question is that? Why shouldn't a doctor be allowed to heal? Well, I could have made the argument, which we don't hold of, but I could have made the argument that the group, I think they're called the Christian Scientists, in fact, makes this argument. And there have been many, many court cases brought against them, the state against so-and-so, because their religious belief is that it is sacrilegious to get involved in healing. Why? Because God hit, let God heal. We can hear that. It's not obscene, right? It's not crazy. If a person believes, as we do, that God is involved in the world, so if God made the person sick, then perhaps we should say God should be the one to heal. I compare it to a parent that's disciplining a child, not in an abusive way, not in a reckless way, not in an overly angry, not in an angry manner. A parent is disciplining a child, and someone jumps in. How dare you speak to that child that way? Excuse me. I'm the father. I'm the parent. This is my child. I need to discipline a child. That's part of parenting. Right? Well, God is disciplining the child. Why are you jumping in? Why are you jumping in? I could have made that argument. But the Torah says, V'rapo yirapeh. We don't make that argument. The Torah says, heal, you shall heal. And that's why we have many, many fine Jewish doctors. Rose, I believe you know at least one. We have many, many fine Jewish doctors. Proud mothers of Jewish doctors, right? To the point that a doctor is considered to be a very Jewish profession, right? A very, very Jewish profession. My son, the doctor, right? So therefore we see from here, V'rapo yirapeh, that you should be healing. That's the Gemara's conclusion. So you see, a doctor has permission to heal. On the contrary, once we say that, then we view it that this is part of God's plan. Yes, God did hit. And what does he want you to do? He wants you to take the steps, the medical steps, to get better. Whether it's a vaccine, whether it's medication, whatever it is. We're supposed to use our knowledge of medicine in order to stay healthy. And if we don't, then we're being reckless with our own health, and God will hold us accountable. Why didn't you utilize the V'rapo yirapeh? But, hear this carefully, the Chavetz Chaim points out the following. The argument that I would have made was, God hit, let God make the person better. Comes the pasuk V'rapo yirapeh to teach me that no, you should get involved with doctors. But one second, we're not discussing over here where a person got an illness that we could say God hit, let God make him better. What's the case the Torah is discussing here in verse 18? When people have, two men are having a fight, and one of them, he hits the other guy with a stone. He hits the other guy with his fist. So what does this have to do with God hit, let God heal? No, you should go to a doctor. God's not hitting. Who hit? His friend hit him. His friend punched him in the face. His friend threw a stone at him. So what does this have to do with what the Gemara is discussing? The Chavetz Chaim says, so what do you see? Right? We always say, my bechira, my free will, stops at your nose. What do we see? If I got hurt, whether it was through an act of nature or it was by a person, if I got hurt, it meant that I was supposed to endure this pain, endure this experience. Not that exonerates that other person. He didn't have a prophecy from God, thou shalt hit Ciner. He didn't have such a clear direction from God. He or she used their free will to cause harm to someone else. They're held accountable. But their bechira stops at my nose. And if I, in fact, was hurt, then it was divinely orchestrated that I would get hurt. So yes, God hit. I might say, let God make me better, even in such a case. So from this rather mundane case, we're learning out workman's compensation. We're learning out doctor's bills. We're learning out the degree of a person's free will. We're learning out how God involves himself in the world and expects us to utilize this world and the advances that we make in science and medicine to keep ourselves healthy. And as we're taking the medication, we should say, Yehi ratzon shetehei esek zolu refuah. We should say, let it be the will of God that this dealing that I'm doing now should lead to healing. Because it's not the medicine that magically makes us better. That's the means. But ultimately, God decides if the person will get better or not. We need to do what's called our hishtadlut. We need to make our efforts. We need to involve ourselves. But ultimately, it comes from God. And all of that is contained in these few psukim, these few verses, which talk about accosting someone else. Let's take a look on page 430. Let's jump forward a little bit. I mentioned before how the Torah is all about protecting the weak, the vulnerable, the underprivileged, those without the sense of power. And here we see verse 20, V'ger lo toneh v'lo tilchatzenu. The ger, the convert, do not taunt, do not oppress. Ki gerim hayitem be'eretz Mitzrayim. You were in that position back in Egypt. And one of the things that the Navi would really take us to task for is not treating slaves properly. You of all people, the Navi said, the prophet said, you of all people who experienced that. And perhaps part of the reason why God put us through that experience was that we would have this compassion for others when they are in such a position. Now you're turning against? Remember, Gerim Hayitem Eretz Mitzrayim. So going back to what type of book is this? All of those events are supposed to shape our national consciousness, our spiritual DNA. I mentioned another class, maybe it's this class, I forget. When Menachem Begin became the prime minister, that was in the 1970s. He became the prime minister. That was the first time that the labor government, since the foundation of the state, was not fully in control. And Menachem Begin came from Poland, was a Holocaust survivor. And one of the first things that he did as prime minister, there was a boat full of people from I forget which country that no one was taking in. And he had Israel take in those boat people. He remembered so vividly the Jews during World War II being stranded on boats and sometimes being sent back into the mouth of the lion, back into Nazi Europe, because no one would take them. So we need to learn from these experiences. Kol almana v'yatom lo ta'anun. And an almana, a widow, yatom, an orphan, lo ta'anun, right? Do not cause them any pain. Lo ta'anun. Lo ta'anun. Does that remind us of anything about the Ten Commandments? The words lo ta'anun. Do we have something like that back in the Aseret HaDibrot? in the Ten Commandments? Let's look back. Parsha Yitro. Page 408 it started, 410, continues through 412. It's getting late. Let's look at command number 9, the last word on page 410, Pasuk Yud Gimel. After lo tirtzach, lo tinaf, lo tignov, 6, 7, 8. 9 is lo ta'aneh v'reyacha eid shaker. Lo ta'aneh, do not answer, do not bear false witness against your friend. Might that be connected to the almanah and the yatom? Lo ta'anun, lo ta'aneh, lo ta'aneh, lo ta'anun. One is to give, to tell false testimony. The other is to oppress, to cause pain. Was there a connection between the false testimony and the way that we treat an orphan and a widow? In court, who has the power? Who has the power over the others? Right? The people who are giving their testimony. Right? They have incredible power over the people that they are testifying against. The life, sometimes the very life of that person is dependent upon their words. Literally, life or death is dependent on their words. Interesting. So this lets us realize, this gives us an understanding back on the Ten Commandments to a certain degree. Lotana v'reachayit shaker, at the root of not bearing false testimony, is wielding power wrongly over others. You've got the power. You can determine the outcome of someone else. Be very, very careful with the power that you have, whether it is in the case of testimony, whether it is in your dealings with the weak, with the oppressed. Let's take a look at one more. Chavdal on that same page. Im kesef talveh et ami et ha'ani imach. Right? When you lend money to my people, to the poor person, imach, that is with you. So on one level, we're learning out, there is here, right, lending money, right? There is an order of priority of first those who are closest to you, your people, and then to the whole general world. But they point out this strange word, the Or HaChaim points out, ehani imach, the poor person that is with you. And he says the Torah is teaching you the hashkafa, the outlook, the perspective a person is supposed to have. Why in the world would God give me an abundance and someone else a deficit? Why is God giving me an abundance and someone else a deficit? It must be that for some reason, that person needs to go through the experience of receiving, and I need to go through the experience of giving. So what's actually happening? Eta'ani imach, that which belongs to that poor person, that which is rightfully his, that which is meant to go to him because it's rightfully his, where is it? Imach, it's with me. Oh, in that case, it's not that I'm being this great, magnanimous, generous, kind person. I'm a bank teller. I'm a bank teller. That person has an account in my bank. So when I need to give it out, the bank teller doesn't decide, well, I don't think I'm going to give it today. I don't like the way that person looked at me. I don't like your attitude. I'm not going to give you the money when you come to take out money from your account. The bank teller can't do that. He's a bank teller. This is money that belongs to that person. Eta'ani imach. the way the Torah phrases this is giving us this hashkafa, this perspective, that it's that which belongs to the poor person, imach, that is with you. So we've seen some examples here how these mundane halachot are teaching us perspective in the world, in God, how God distributes money, in what can happen to a person, in the way we're supposed to navigate through our health issues in this world. It gives us nods to that which happened earlier on in the Sefer Bereshit, in those events that formed us as a nation. And it gives us insight into the Ten Commandments, and Ten Commandments gives us insight here. It is all interrelated into Torah Chaim. This is a Torah of life. These are instructions for life, and therefore it includes the stories and the laws and the science and the healing and the finance. It's all this composite, because as Ora had said, as we said, we're living in this physical world, and this is giving us the way to touch that which is eternal, to touch that which goes beyond this world. Asher kiddishanu b'mitzvotav, that we become sanctified through our mitzvot. Mitzvah is the Yud K Vav K that we reflect and we touch when we do all of these mundane acts. That is what transforms a person into a godly person, that takes that spark of godliness, that chelik elokam mimal, that part of God from above, and turns it into this flaming entity of godliness. Adam, mankind is called Adam. Why? Because we come from the Adamah, we come from the earth. But another reason is because we have the potential to be Adameh. We have the potential to become similar to. Adameh means I will become similar to. So we're Adam, because even though we come from the Adamah, we have the potential of Adameh, to become godlike. And that's what each day is given to us for, my friends. Okay, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Good learning together. A good day, everybody. And I'll see you Thursday for our lunch and learn, those who can join us. Our lunch and learn is going to be changing to 12:30 now that we're off our winter schedule. Right? So to 12:35. So lunch and learn is back to our 12:30. I'll include that in the email that goes out. And the topic this week, Kathy, I liked your idea, but that's a whole series. And we have Purim coming up, and we have Pesach coming up. We'll probably do that
Thank you,
series.
Rabbi.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome, Elizabeth. Right?
Thank you.
Do you have a
You're very
second after?
Of course, Kathy. Yeah. But the topic this week is going to be from our Parsha, which is an eye for an eye that the Torah speaks about, but we don't mean an eye for an eye. So how that's misinterpreted, and how it's in fact meant to be interpreted, and why it's written in the way that it's written, that will be this Thursday. An eye for an eye, everybody. Okay? Very
Thank
good,
you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Kathy, we'll stay on for a minute.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're very welcome, everybody.